Following up on the analysis of the Pot series, the Treasure series is another group of cards centered around card advantage. Unfortunately, unlike the Pot series, the Treasure cards do not have the strictest naming convention. Although there are several members with a card or cards of name, I am still not sure where the line should be drawn though. For instance, should Supercharge be included, because it does have the effect of drawing 2 cards? And by that notion, what about Light of Sekka, or even the card named Treasure Map? That card has treasure in the name, and draws 2 cards, albeit with a wonky activation condition, and with a discard effect after drawing those cards. At some point, I should probably talk about Jar of Greed and Jar of Avarice as well. They did not really fit into either the Jar or Pot series videos though, but I am already getting really off track. I'm going to start with the Card of series, then a couple draw spells, by which I mean spells which have the word draw in their name, as most of these cards can be classified as draw spells, and then finish up with some continuous spells. Card of Demise can draw up to 3 cards, and in that respect, has a higher ceiling than Pot of Greed. But at what cost? Preventing damage for the turn, removing the ability to special summon for the turn, and potentially discarding those cards during the end phase. Put another way, double the damage reduction of Pot of Prosperity, the downside of both Pot of Duality and Into the Void. Still, the card sees play and is so strong it is limited in the TCG at the time of writing. It is such a relief that the card was substantially watered down compared to its anime version though, a trait which it shares with Card of Sanctity. The main game version is undertuned in my opinion. Banishing all cards from hand and on your side of the field, with a minimum of 1 from each, makes the card a -1. I guess you do not have to own the cards which would be banished, so maybe this card could be used to banish a boss monster which you took from your opponent with a Change of Heart effect, and maybe even a spell taken with Grave Robber, but that is ridiculous. Card of Fate is also ridiculous, but I really like the card. This card is maybe 10% as powerful as Painful Choice, for a few reasons. The card you get is random, which may be circumstantially worse than the mind games Painful Choice generates. This card cannot set up the graveyard since the other cards are returned to the deck. And, most importantly, the effect is symmetric, but not really. Your opponent goes +1 with a 20% chance of netting the best card in their deck to hand. It is not the best idea to run cards which benefit the opponent, but a worse idea to disproportionately benefit your opponent. Still, this card looks fun, like it was made for anime moments, especially in a free-for-all game. Card of Sacrifice is a trap card, already deviating a bit from the formula. It has a pretty steep condition, with the combined attack points of your board having to be lower than the weakest monster on your opponent's side of the field, and then it removes the ability to summon or change the battle position of your monsters for the rest of the turn. It is a trap, so giving up summoning during the opponent's turn is not a horrible downside, and the card is still a +1. This card looks like it is a well-designed swing card benefiting the player who is behind, but I think the card is undertuned with such a difficult activation condition to meet. Moving on to the Cards of Cards, which happen to come in pairs. Cards for Black Feathers and Cards from the Sky are very similar. Cards for Black Feathers requires a Blackwing monster, based on the Japanese name for the cards, while Cards from the Sky requires a Light Fairy, which is admittedly a deeper pool of targets, and to compensate, the card also restricts the battle phase. This battle phase restriction is pretty flavorful as well, since fairies are typically less aggressive than other monster types. Unlike Cards for Black Feathers, the Cards from the Sky lacks a once per turn restriction, which is actually a feature more common than I had anticipated. The other pair of Cards are Dragon Discarders, with Cards of Consonance and Cards of the Red Stone. The first discards low attack Dragon Tuners and lacks a once per turn restriction, while the second is limited to level 7 Red Eyes monsters, but also offers a Foolish Burial effect specific to level 7 Red Eyes monsters. I like how Cards of Consonance, along with Whitestone of Legend, synergize with Trade-In, while the level 7 Red Eyes monsters help to fuel the Sword of 7 Stars for even more draw power. There are 2 draw cards I want to mention, Advanced Draw and Burning Draw. I did not know that this was a change, but for a period of time, tribute summons were called advanced summons. This was reverted back to tribute summon after the next Master Rule update. That is why Advanced Draw and Advanced Force deal with high-level monsters, by the way. But back to Advanced Draw, which I keep wanting to call Advanced Draw. Tributing a level 8 monster is steep, but the monster could have been special summoned, and I believe even a token as well. It is a shame that the level 8 Hieratic Dragon does not have an effect when it is tributed, because it would synergize so well with Advanced Draw. Burning Draw, in the other hand, is a Salamangreat card. Glad the regionalization team is still earning their keep. This card softly locks the player out of summoning, except for fire attribute monsters, which does go along with the Salamangreat name. I think this card is designed to be a catch-up card that requires your opponent to control more cards than you, which reminds me a bit of Balance of Judgment, but more importantly, requires them to have a link monster on the field. That second requirement is enough to relegate the card to the side deck, but in the right matchup, this card could reasonably draw 4 cards, but technically up to 6 cards, which is such an enticing ceiling that the card sees some play. The last cards that I want to mention are 2 more pairs of continuous spell cards. Card of Safe Return is one of the strongest draw cards in the game, especially with zombies, and if you're a little creative in deck building, Dark Worlds as well. The anime version of the card drew 3 cards each time you special summon from grave, which is still reflected in the artwork for the card, but even after the nerf, the main game equivalent has been banned for ages, and I don't expect it to come off the list without an erratum. Precious Cards from Beyond, on the other hand, has never been good, despite drawing 2 cards at a time. It really highlights how valuable the once per turn normal summon is compared to the unlimited number of special summons. Trinity format limits the number of special summons in a turn to 3, so maybe Card of Safe Return could make a return in that format. And by the same notion, the unlimited normal summons and rush duels might be enough to break Precious Cards from Beyond. Just some food for thought. I'm going to end on Mystical Cards of Light and Guarded, or Guardian, Treasure if you watch the anime. Both offer double draws during the draw phase, and each has an interesting, if not too punishing, drawback. Mystical Cards of Light is only useful if you have exactly 2 copies, and at that point you would only have 1 free spell and trap zone, which completely removes the pendulum mechanic, since pendulum scales go into the main spell and trap card zones now. Worse yet, the card does not do anything until the next draw phase, if and only if both copies of the card survive. I genuinely think that 7 is more playable, even though it requires 3 copies in order to draw 3 cards. Not only that, they heal for a total of 2100 life points, and at the very least, you get something out of your opponent activating an MST. Guarded Treasure is the biggest all-in card since Final Destiny, requiring 5 cards to be discarded, and is just as slow as Mystical Swords of Light. Technically, this card can be used with the Fabled or Danger archetypes, not Dark Worlds, because the discard is a cost and not a card effect. But you would have to be going second and have 5 monsters in hand to get the most out of the mass discard. This card really makes Shard of Greed look broken by comparison. I like how the Treasure series has power level ranging from game-breaking to potentially one of the worst cards in the game. It fits so well with the Pot series, and the variety effects in both do help to answer the question, how far are you willing to go for card advantage? Ultimately, it is a personal choice, but I hope this helps a little to make a more informed decision, at the least.